Chapter 1. A Small Town Boy. Volodymyr Zelensky was born in a city called Kryvyi Rih. It is in Ukraine, a country in Eastern Europe. The city was not very famous. It was not big or beautiful like Kyiv, the capital. Kryvyi Rih was an industrial city. There were many factories and mines. People worked hard every day. They woke up early and came home late. Life was not easy, but they were proud of their work. Volodymyr's parents were educated people. His father was a professor. He taught computer science at a university. His mother worked as an engineer. They both loved learning. Books were very important in their home. They wanted their son to study hard and have a good future. But Volodymyr was different. He liked to laugh. He liked to tell jokes. He wanted to make people happy. As a little boy, Volodymyr was always full of energy. He loved playing with his friends in the streets. They played football, rode bicycles, and sometimes got into trouble. But Volodymyr had a special talent. He could make everyone laugh. He made funny faces and told silly stories. His friends loved being around him. Life in Ukraine was not always happy. At that time, the country was part of the Soviet Union. The government controlled everything: what people said, what they read, and even what they watched on TV. There were strict rules. People could not speak freely. They had to be careful with their words. If they said the wrong thing, they could get into trouble. But even in such difficult times, people found small joys. They enjoyed family dinners, music, and old movies. Volodymyr's family wanted a better life for him. His father often said, "Education is the key to success." So young Volodymyr studied hard. He was a good student. He liked reading history books and learning about the world. But deep inside, he had a dream. He wanted to be on stage. He wanted to perform. One day, at school, there was a talent show. Volodymyr decided to join. He prepared a funny skit. When it was his turn, he stood on stage and looked at the crowd. His heart was beating fast. What if they did not laugh? What if he forgot his lines? But as soon as he started talking, everyone laughed. His jokes worked. The room was full of smiles. At that moment, Volodymyr knew he loved performing. His parents were proud, but they were also worried. They wanted him to have a stable career. They wanted him to become a lawyer or a doctor. "Comedy is not a real job," his mother said. But Volodymyr did not give up. He continued to make people laugh, even at home. He told stories at family dinners. His grandfather, a war veteran, always smiled and clapped for him. The Soviet Union was changing. Life in Ukraine was changing too. In 1991, something big happened. Ukraine became independent. People hoped for a better future. But it was not easy. Factories closed. Jobs disappeared. Many families struggled, including Volodymyr's. Money was tight. Despite the hard times, Volodymyr did not lose hope. He knew that laughter was important. It helped people forget their problems, even for a short time. He began to dream even bigger. Maybe one day he could be on television. Maybe he could make the whole country laugh. When he was a teenager, Volodymyr's school joined a comedy competition. The competition was called KVN, a famous game show in the former Soviet Union. Teams from different cities performed funny sketches. It was a big deal. Volodymyr and his friends practiced day and night. They wrote jokes, rehearsed their lines, and perfected their timing. Finally, the day came. The stage was huge. The lights were bright. Volodymyr felt nervous, but as soon as he spoke, the audience laughed. Loud and long. They won the competition. Volodymyr's team was invited to perform on national TV. It was his first big break. But behind the laughter, there were challenges. Comedy was not always safe. Some jokes could upset important people. Ukraine was still struggling. Corruption was everywhere. People were losing hope. They were tired of broken promises. But Volodymyr believed in something different. He believed in honesty and kindness. As he grew older, he learned more about his country's problems. He saw how difficult life was for many people. He wanted to help, but he was just a comedian. Or was he? Little did he know, his life was about to take an unexpected turn. Chapter 2. The Funny Kid. Volodymyr Zelensky was always the funny one in class. He could not help it. Making people laugh came naturally to him. At school, he told jokes, did impressions, and made funny faces. His classmates loved it. Even the teachers sometimes laughed, though they tried to hide it. But Volodymyr was more than just a joker. He was also smart. He studied hard because his parents wanted him to. They believed education was the key to success. His father often reminded him, "A good career will give you a good life." His mother agreed. They both wanted him to become a lawyer. Lawyers were respected. They had important jobs. Volodymyr listened to his parents, but deep inside, he had different dreams. He loved being on stage. He loved the way people smiled when he performed. It felt special. It felt right. At school, there were talent shows every year. Volodymyr joined them all. He wrote his own jokes and practiced in front of the mirror. Sometimes he tried new ideas in front of his friends first. If they laughed, he knew the joke was good. If they didn't, he tried again. One year, during a school event, Volodymyr performed a comedy sketch. The audience was quiet at first. He felt nervous. His heart pounded in his chest. What if they did not laugh? What if he forgot his lines? But then, someone giggled. Then another. Soon, the whole room was laughing. Volodymyr's face lit up with joy. That night, he knew. He wanted to make people laugh forever. But at home, things were different. His parents were serious people. They wanted him to focus on his studies. Comedy, they thought, was just a hobby. "You cannot make a living from jokes," his father said one evening. But Volodymyr didn't argue. He respected his parents. So he studied during the day and dreamed of performing at night. Life in Ukraine was not easy at that time. The country was still changing. After gaining independence from the Soviet Union, people had many hopes, but they also faced many problems. Jobs were scarce, prices were high, families struggled. Laughter was one of the few things that brought joy during difficult times. Volodymyr understood this. Despite the challenges, he continued to perform at school events. He loved entertaining his friends. They would gather after class, and Volodymyr would act out scenes from movies or create funny characters. He imitated teachers, famous actors, and even politicians. His timing was perfect, his expressions unforgettable. One day, his school announced a big competition. It was a comedy contest, and students from different schools would participate. Volodymyr saw this as a chance. He worked hard on his routine. He practiced in front of his family, though they were not sure if he should enter. "Study first," his mother said. But Volodymyr smiled and said, "I'll do both." On the day of the contest, he stood backstage, feeling nervous. The stage looked so big. The lights were bright. His hands felt cold. But he took a deep breath and stepped forward. As soon as he started his act, everything changed. The audience laughed and cheered. They loved him. Volodymyr won first prize. It was one of the happiest days of his life. After that, people at school started calling him the funny kid. He enjoyed it. He felt proud. But deep inside, he wondered, could he really turn this into a career? One day, a friend told him about a famous comedy competition on TV. It was called KVN, a show where teams competed in comedy sketches. Volodymyr was excited. This was his chance to perform in front of a big audience. But there was a problem. His parents were still not convinced. They thought it was just another distraction. "Focus on your studies," his father warned. Volodymyr faced a tough choice. Should he follow his passion or listen to his parents? He decided to do both. He studied hard for his exams and secretly practiced for the show. When the competition day came, he was ready. His team performed well. The audience loved them. They won the regional competition and moved on to the next round. Winning gave him confidence. It made him believe in himself even more. But success did not come without challenges. Some people said he should not waste his time. They said comedy was not serious work. Others supported him and told him to follow his heart. Volodymyr chose to keep going. He balanced school and comedy carefully. During the day, he studied history and law. At night, he wrote jokes and practiced in front of the mirror. It was not easy, but he loved it. Looking back, Volodymyr always remembered those school days with a smile. They were the beginning of something big. He did not know it yet, but his humor, his passion, and his determination would one day take him much further than he ever imagined. Chapter 3. Comedy Dreams Come True. Volodymyr Zelensky loved making people laugh. It was his passion. He dreamed of doing it on a bigger stage. One day, that dream started to come true. As a young man, Volodymyr joined a comedy team. They called themselves Kvartal 95. It was a small group of friends with big ideas. They wrote their own jokes and performed funny skits. At first, they performed in small theaters. The audience was small too, but every laugh gave them hope. They believed in their dream. Volodymyr was not just a performer. He was also a writer. He spent hours working on jokes and scripts. He wanted the humor to feel real. He wanted people to laugh and think at the same time. His comedy was clever, but it was also kind. It was about everyday life, things that people understood. Soon, their performances became more popular. More people came to see them. The laughter grew louder. Kvartal 95 was invited to perform on KVN, a famous comedy show in the former Soviet Union. This was their big chance. They traveled to Moscow to compete against the best comedy teams. The competition was tough. Teams from Russia, Belarus, and Kazakhstan were strong. They had more experience. Volodymyr and his team felt nervous. What if they were not good enough? What if the audience did not laugh? But when they stepped onto the stage, everything changed. Volodymyr's energy was unstoppable. His jokes were sharp and funny. The audience laughed and clapped. They loved his style. He talked about real life, real struggles, and people could relate. Kvartal 95 won several rounds and made it to the finals. Their victory brought them fame. Suddenly, everyone in Ukraine knew their names. They appeared on TV more often. Volodymyr became a star. People stopped him in the streets to say hello. They smiled when they saw him. They felt like he understood them. But fame also brought challenges. The entertainment industry was not easy. There were many expectations. Volodymyr had to work harder than ever. Writing scripts, rehearsing, and performing took long hours. Sometimes he felt tired. Sometimes he felt pressure. But he never gave up. He knew that laughter was important, especially in difficult times. Ukraine was going through changes. The economy was struggling. Many people were unhappy. They needed hope. Volodymyr and Kvartal 95 gave them a reason to smile. Their humor was not just about jokes. It was about life, family, and dreams. One of their most famous shows was about life in a small Ukrainian town. People loved it because it felt real. The jokes were funny, but they also showed the truth. Corruption, poverty, and politics were big problems in Ukraine. Kvartal 95 talked about these things in a way that made people laugh, but also think. As their success grew, Volodymyr faced an important decision. Should he continue with comedy or try something bigger? He wanted to do more. He wanted to make a difference. But he was not sure how. Then, something unexpected happened. A television producer offered Kvartal 95 their own show. It was a dream come true. They could create their own content, their own style. No more small stages. They were going to be on national TV every week. It was exciting, but also scary. The show was a huge success. Millions of people watched it. Volodymyr became more famous than ever. His humor was different. It was honest. It made people feel like someone understood their struggles. His jokes made them laugh, but they also gave them hope. Despite his success, Volodymyr stayed humble. He did not act like a celebrity. He still worked hard every day. He still listened to people's stories. He knew that comedy was not just about making jokes. It was about making connections. But deep inside, he wondered, could he do more? Could he help people in a different way? He didn't have the answer yet. Kvartal 95 continued to grow. They toured across Ukraine and performed in other countries too. Their message was simple. Laughter brings people together. Volodymyr's journey from a small-town boy to a national star was incredible. But his story was far from over. In fact, it was just beginning. Something bigger was waiting for him. Something he never imagined. Chapter 4. The Man on TV. Volodymyr Zelensky's dream was coming true. He was not just a comedian anymore. He was becoming a well-known actor. People across Ukraine watched him on television. They laughed at his jokes and loved his characters. Volodymyr acted in many TV shows and movies. He played funny roles, but also serious ones. His charm and humor made him popular. Families gathered in their living rooms to watch him perform. He was not just an entertainer, he was someone they trusted. Then, in 2015, something special happened. A new TV show called Servant of the People was released. It was different from anything he had done before. In the show, Volodymyr played Vasyl Holoborodko, an ordinary history teacher. Vasyl was a kind man. He was honest and fair. One day, a video of him complaining about corruption went viral. People liked what he said. They believed in him. Then something surprising happened. Vasyl became the president of Ukraine. The show was funny, but it also made people think. What if a regular person, not a politician, could lead the country? What if someone honest and good could change everything? Many Ukrainians watched the show and felt inspired. They were tired of corruption. They wanted change. Volodymyr's acting made the idea feel possible. He played the role with heart. His character cared about people. He tried to solve real problems. He faced challenges with humor, but also with determination. Ukrainians connected with him. They saw their own hopes and dreams in the story. The show became a huge success. Everyone talked about it. People watched it in cafes, at home, and even in schools. They laughed, they cried, and they wondered, could life really imitate art? Despite the success, Volodymyr stayed humble. He knew it was just a role, but deep inside, something changed. He started thinking about real life. He saw the problems people faced every day. Poverty, corruption, and unfairness were everywhere. Could something be done? Could someone like Vasyl Holoborodko exist in real life? While the show continued, Volodymyr kept working hard. Filming was not easy. Long hours, early mornings, and late nights took a toll. But he loved his work. He loved making people smile. And most of all, he loved the message of the show. As time passed, people started asking questions. What if Volodymyr ran for president? At first, he laughed. "I'm just an actor," he said. But the idea stayed in his mind. Could he really help his country? Was it possible to bring honesty and kindness to politics? His friends and family noticed the change in him. He was thinking more about Ukraine's future. He started meeting people outside the entertainment world. He listened to their problems. He wanted to understand what life was really like for ordinary people. The success of Servant of the People spread beyond Ukraine. Other countries watched it too. They found it interesting and inspiring. Some even believed it could happen in their own countries. But fame was not always easy. Some politicians did not like the show. They said it made fun of the government. Others thought it gave people false hope. But Volodymyr believed in his work. He thought it was important to make people believe in change. One day, a journalist asked him, "Would you ever think about becoming president for real?" Volodymyr smiled and said, "Why not? If the people want change, anything is possible." It was just a simple answer, but it made headlines. Slowly, something new was happening. People stopped seeing him only as an actor. They started seeing him as a leader. They believed he could be more than a man on TV. They believed he could be the man to change Ukraine. Volodymyr still loved comedy, but he knew that life was not just about jokes. It was about responsibility. It was about doing something good. Could he take that step? Could he turn fiction into reality? The idea grew stronger every day. The people loved him. They trusted him. And in his heart, Volodymyr started to believe, maybe, just maybe, it was time to try. But stepping into politics was not like being on stage. It was serious. It was difficult. And it was full of challenges he never imagined. Little did he know, his life was about to change forever. Chapter 5. A surprising decision. In 2019, something unexpected happened. Volodymyr Zelensky made a big announcement. He said he was running for president of Ukraine. The news spread quickly. People could not believe it. Was he serious? Volodymyr was a comedian, not a politician. Many thought it was just another joke, but it was not a joke. Volodymyr was serious. He believed Ukraine needed a change. The country had many problems: corruption, poverty, and war in the East. People were tired. They were losing hope. They wanted something different. They wanted someone they could trust. Volodymyr's announcement shocked the political world. Some laughed at him. Others criticized him. They said he had no experience. How can a comedian run a country? They asked. But Volodymyr did not listen to the critics. He believed in his message. His campaign was different from others. He did not make big speeches in government halls. He did not promise things he could not do. Instead, he talked to ordinary people. He listened to their worries. He traveled across Ukraine, meeting farmers, teachers, and factory workers. He asked them what they wanted. Volodymyr's campaign focused on hope. He wanted to end corruption. He wanted peace. He wanted Ukraine to be a better place for everyone. People liked his honesty. He spoke simply, with no complicated words. He made people feel that he understood them. Social media played a big role in his campaign. Instead of long debates, he used videos to talk to the people. His team created funny but serious messages. They showed how life could be better. Young people liked this modern approach. They shared his videos everywhere. As the election day came closer, excitement grew. Some people still thought it was impossible. Others began to believe. Maybe he can really do it, they said. Volodymyr's popularity grew quickly. But the journey was not easy. Political opponents attacked him. They said he was too young, too inexperienced. They said running a country was not like acting in a TV show. Some tried to spread false stories about him. They wanted to make people afraid. Volodymyr did not fight back with anger. He stayed calm. He focused on his message, change, hope, honesty. He told the people, "I am not a politician. I am just like you." This message touched hearts. His supporters came from different places. Young people, old people, workers, and business owners all stood with him. They wanted someone new, someone fresh. They were tired of empty promises. Finally, election day arrived. Millions of people went to vote. The results came in. Volodymyr won. He received more than 70% of the votes. It was a huge victory. People cheered in the streets. They were hopeful. They believed in him. For Volodymyr, it was a life-changing moment. Just a few years ago, he was making jokes on TV. Now, he was the president of Ukraine. It was exciting, but also scary. The real work was just beginning. After the celebrations, reality set in. Leading a country is not like playing a role on television. It is difficult. It is serious. People expect results. They expect change. Volodymyr knew this would not be easy. His first speech as president was simple but powerful. "I will work for you," he said. "Together, we will build a better Ukraine." People listened. They believed in him. They wanted to give him a chance. But some challenges were bigger than he expected. The economy was weak. Corruption was everywhere. The war in the East continued. Many people were still struggling. Volodymyr knew he had to act fast. Despite the difficulties, he remained positive. He surrounded himself with experts. He learned quickly. He made plans to fight corruption and improve the economy. Step by step, he started his journey as a leader. Not everyone supported him. Some politicians did not want change. They tried to stop his plans. They wanted things to stay the same. Volodymyr had to stay strong. He had to prove that he was more than just a comedian. His story inspired people around the world. They saw him as a symbol of hope. He showed that anyone, even a comedian, could make a difference if they truly cared. But the biggest challenge was yet to come. Something that would test him like never before. Before we begin, Chapter 6, a quick note for our listeners. You're currently listening to this audiobook on Woo English. Remember, this content is specially made for Woo English listeners only. If you're hearing it on any other channel, it may be a violation of Woo English's rights. Please ensure you're tuned into the right source to fully enjoy and respect this audiobook journey. Now, let's continue the story. Chapter 6. winning the election. The road to victory was not easy. Volodymyr Zelensky was famous, but fame was not enough. He had to prove that he could lead a country. Ukraine was facing serious problems. Corruption, conflict, and economic struggles made life hard for many people. They needed hope. They needed change. Volodymyr understood this. He did not want to be just another politician with empty promises. He wanted to be different. His message was simple but powerful. End corruption, bring peace, and unite the country. To reach people, he traveled all over Ukraine. He visited small villages and big cities. He met farmers, teachers, students, and factory workers. He listened to their stories. People told him about their struggles. They talked about their hopes. Volodymyr listened carefully. He wanted to understand what they needed. At every stop, crowds gathered to see him. Some came out of curiosity. Others believed in him. They saw him as one of them, an ordinary person who understood their problems. His words were not complicated. He spoke simply, directly, and honestly. "I am not a politician," he told them. "I am here to serve you." His campaign was different from traditional ones. He did not rely on big rallies or expensive ads. Instead, he used social media to connect with people. His videos were funny, but also serious. He talked about corruption and how it affected everyday life. Young people shared his messages online. They believed he could bring a new future, but not everyone supported him. His opponents said he was too inexperienced. They said Ukraine needed a strong leader, not a comedian. Some people doubted him. "Can he really lead a country?" they asked. But Volodymyr did not give up. He kept moving forward. The election campaign was full of challenges. Some politicians tried to stop him. They spread rumors. They tried to make him look weak. Volodymyr stayed calm. He answered with facts, not anger. He reminded people of his goals: honesty, peace, and unity. As election day came closer, excitement grew. The country was watching closely. People were tired of the same old leaders. They wanted something new. But could they really trust him? Could a comedian become president? Finally, the day arrived. Millions of Ukrainians went to vote. The lines were long. The air was full of hope and uncertainty. Families discussed their choices. Friends debated. The whole country was waiting. When the results were announced, the news spread like wildfire. Volodymyr Zelensky had won. More than 70% of people voted for him. It was a landslide victory. Ukraine had chosen a new path. The streets filled with celebration. People waved flags and cheered. For many, it was a moment of joy. They believed in a better future. They believed that someone honest could lead them. For Volodymyr, it was a life-changing moment. He had always made people laugh. Now, they were looking to him for something much bigger: hope. His victory speech was short but meaningful. Standing in front of a crowd, he smiled and said, Thank you. I will not let you down." The people applauded. They believed him. But winning the election was just the beginning. The real work was about to start. Running a country is not the same as acting in a comedy show. Volodymyr knew he had to learn quickly. He needed the right people around him. He needed to make real changes. There were many challenges ahead. Corruption was deeply rooted. The war in the East was still going on. The economy was weak. Some people doubted him. Others were ready to see him fail. But Volodymyr was determined. He wanted to show the world that an ordinary person could lead with honesty and kindness. His journey had just begun, and he was ready for the challenges ahead. Chapter 7. A Nation Divided. Becoming president was a great honor, but it was also a great challenge. Volodymyr Zelensky soon realized that leading a country was very different from acting on television. The problems were real. The people were not an audience. They were counting on him to make their lives better. Ukraine was facing many difficulties. The economy was weak. Corruption was everywhere. In the East, war continued. Some people believed in him. They had voted for him with hope in their hearts. They thought he could bring change. But others were unsure. They did not trust him. They thought he was just a comedian, not a real leader. Volodymyr wanted to prove them wrong. He wanted to unite the country. He traveled across Ukraine, just like he did during his campaign. He spoke to farmers, factory workers, students, and business owners. He listened to their worries. He promised to fight corruption and work for peace. But things were not easy. The political system was complicated. Some powerful people did not want change. They wanted things to stay the same. They tried to slow him down. They made his job harder. Volodymyr had to be patient. He had to stay strong. At the same time, danger was growing outside Ukraine. Russia was watching closely. For years, there had been tension between the two countries. In 2014, Russia had taken Crimea, a part of Ukraine. The world watched, but nothing stopped it. Now, Russian forces were in eastern Ukraine, fighting against Ukrainian soldiers. Volodymyr wanted peace. He spoke with world leaders. He asked for help. He wanted to protect his country, but he also wanted to avoid war. He knew that war would bring suffering. Families would be torn apart. Cities would be destroyed. He tried to find a solution through diplomacy. Some people thought he was too soft. They wanted him to be stronger against Russia. Others thought he was doing the right thing. The country was divided. People had different opinions. Some wanted to move closer to Europe. Others still had ties to Russia. The tension was growing. Volodymyr did not give up. He worked day and night. His team looked for ways to improve the economy. They created new policies to fight corruption. Slowly, progress was made. Some things improved, but the problems were big. One day, during a speech, he said, "We are one nation. We must stand together." His words were powerful, but unity was not easy. Different regions had different needs. People wanted quick results, but change takes time. Despite the challenges, Volodymyr stayed optimistic. He believed in his people. He believed that Ukraine could be strong if everyone worked together. But deep inside, he knew something dark was coming. Russia was not just watching. It was planning. Reports of Russian military movements worried the government. Soldiers gathered near Ukraine's borders. Tanks, planes, and weapons were being prepared. The world watched, waiting to see what would happen next. Would Russia invade? Would there be war? Volodymyr remained calm. He spoke to his people with confidence. "We will not be afraid," he said. "We will protect our home." But behind closed doors, he knew the situation was serious. His advisors warned him. Ukraine needed help. They needed support from other countries. He reached out to leaders in Europe and the United States. He asked for weapons, for economic support, and for strong action against Russia. Some countries helped. Others hesitated. Time was running out. The people of Ukraine could feel the tension. Some were scared. Others prepared to defend their homeland. Families worried about the future. The streets were filled with whispers. Will there be war? Volodymyr's leadership was being tested. He had to stay strong. He had to keep the country together. He had to make difficult choices. As the days passed, the threat became more real. One cold night, news arrived that Russian troops were moving closer. The moment everyone feared was near. Volodymyr stood in his office, looking out over the city of Kyiv. Lights flickered in the distance. People were still living their lives, but he knew everything could change soon. He took a deep breath. "I must be ready," he thought. He was not a comedian anymore. He was a leader, and his country needed him. Chapter 8. The Storm Arrives. It was a cold morning in February 2022. The sky over Ukraine was dark and heavy. The streets of Kyiv were quiet. People whispered in fear. Something terrible was about to happen. Then the news came. Russia had invaded. Bombs exploded in cities across the country. Missiles struck homes, schools, and hospitals. Sirens wailed in the distance. Soldiers poured across the borders. Tanks rolled through the streets. Ukraine was under attack. People panicked. Some ran to underground shelters. Others packed their bags and left their homes. Mothers held their children close. Fathers worried about what to do next. Fear was everywhere. Many thought the government would leave. They believed the president would escape to a safer place. It would have been easy to do. Leaders in other countries offered help. They said, "Come to safety." But Volodymyr Zelensky did not leave. He stayed. He stood in the heart of Kyiv, his country's capital. He looked straight into the camera and spoke just 4 words. "I am here." Those words echoed around the world. Ukrainians felt a spark of hope. Their president had not abandoned them. He was standing strong. He was one of them. The city of Kyiv became a battlefield. Russian forces wanted to take it. They wanted to capture the government, but Volodymyr and his team refused to surrender. They moved from place to place, working day and night. They spoke to the people. They told them, "We will not give up." The streets were dangerous. Explosions shook the ground. Windows shattered. Fires burned. But the people of Ukraine did not lose hope. They stood together. they believed in their leader. Volodymyr gave speeches every day. His voice was calm but firm. He wore a simple green military shirt. There were no fancy suits, no grand offices, just a man standing in the middle of a war zone leading his people. The world watched in awe. Countries that once doubted him now called him a hero. Leaders around the globe praised his courage. They sent weapons, money, and supplies. They stood with Ukraine. Despite the danger, Volodymyr did not stop. He walked through the streets. He met with soldiers and volunteers. He shook hands with those defending their homes. "We are strong," he told them. "We will fight for our freedom." Every night, he recorded messages for his people. He spoke about bravery and unity. He told stories of farmers defending their fields, of grandmothers cooking for soldiers, of children drawing pictures of peace. But war is cruel. Every day brought new tragedies. Families were separated. Cities were destroyed. People lost their homes. Still, Volodymyr remained steadfast. He spoke to the world and asked for more help. "We need weapons," he said. "We need support." The days turned into weeks. The fighting continued. The Ukrainian people showed incredible strength. They refused to surrender. They pushed back against the Russian forces. Small towns became symbols of resistance. Ordinary citizens became heroes. Volodymyr's leadership gave them courage. He was not hiding in a palace. He was with them, sharing their struggles. His words inspired not only Ukrainians, but people across the world. They held rallies. They sent donations. They flew Ukrainian flags in cities far away. Despite the hardship, Volodymyr never showed fear. His determination was clear. "We will win," he said. "We are fighting for our future." And so, the storm continued. Bombs fell, battles raged, but Ukraine stood strong. The world had witnessed something extraordinary. A comedian-turned-president had become a wartime leader. Volodymyr Zelensky's story was no longer just about politics. It was about courage. It was about standing tall when everything seemed to fall apart. It was about hope, even in the darkest times. Chapter 9. Leading in War. War had come to Ukraine. The streets were no longer safe. Families hid in basements. Soldiers stood guard at every corner. The sound of explosions filled the air. In these dark times, Ukraine needed a leader. Volodymyr Zelensky was that leader. He did not sleep much. He worked day and night. His days were filled with meetings, phone calls, and decisions. His face looked tired, but his spirit was strong. He spoke to his people every day. His voice was calm, but his words were powerful. "We will not give up," he said. "We will fight for our freedom." His speeches were broadcast on television, the radio, and social media. People listened in shelters. Soldiers listened on the front lines. Families listened in faraway countries, waiting for news. His words gave them strength. But words were not enough. Ukraine needed help. Volodymyr reached out to world leaders. He called presidents and prime ministers. He asked for weapons, for supplies, for support. Some were quick to help, others hesitated. They feared the consequences of helping too much. Volodymyr did not stop. He spoke to parliaments in many countries. He addressed the European Union, the United Nations, and the United States Congress. His speeches were full of emotion. He told stories of the people suffering. He reminded the world of Ukraine's bravery. In one speech, he said, "We are fighting not just for Ukraine, but for freedom everywhere." His words echoed across the world. Crowds gathered in different cities holding Ukrainian flags. People chanted his name. They called him a hero. Still, the war continued. Cities were bombed. Villages were destroyed. Families were torn apart. Volodymyr visited hospitals. He met wounded soldiers. He spoke to mothers who had lost their sons. His heart was heavy, but he did not show weakness. He had to stay strong for his people. One day, a journalist asked him, "Are you afraid?" He looked at the camera and said, "I am not afraid. I am here. We are all here." His courage inspired millions. Young men and women joined the army. Ordinary people became volunteers. Some cooked meals for soldiers. Others sewed camouflage uniforms. Farmers used their tractors to block enemy tanks. Everyone wanted to help. The situation remained dangerous. Russian forces attacked from different directions. They had more weapons, more soldiers. Ukraine was smaller, but it was determined. Volodymyr reminded his people, "Strength is not in numbers. Strength is in unity." He worked closely with his generals. He trusted their advice, but he also listened to the people. Volunteers, teachers, doctors, they all had ideas. He wanted everyone to feel important. "This is our fight," he said, "and together we will win." Despite the war, life had to continue. Children needed to learn. Shops had to stay open. Farmers had to plant crops. Volodymyr encouraged everyone to keep going. He wanted them to feel hope, even in the middle of war. Late at night, in his office, he read letters from Ukrainians. Some wrote about their fears. Others shared stories of bravery. One letter from a little girl said, "Dear Mr. President, I believe in you." Volodymyr smiled and wrote back, "I believe in you too." Days turned into weeks. Weeks turned into months. The war was far from over, but Volodymyr kept leading. His message never changed. Ukraine is strong. We will never surrender. World leaders continued to visit Kyiv. They walked with him through the damaged streets. They saw destroyed buildings and broken homes. They promised more support. They promised justice. Through it all, Volodymyr stayed with his people. He could have left. Many leaders do in times of war. But he remained in Kyiv, walking the same streets, breathing the same air. His presence gave hope. No one knew what the future would bring. But one thing was clear. Ukraine had a leader who would never give up. And neither would its people. Chapter 10. The Power of Unity. When the war began, fear filled the air. Bombs fell, sirens wailed, and people worried about their future. But something incredible happened. The people of Ukraine stood together. They refused to give up. They fought not just with weapons, but with their hearts. Farmers, teachers, students, and shopkeepers all joined the fight. Some took up arms. Others helped in different ways. They cooked food for soldiers. They made camouflage nets. They took care of the wounded. Everyone found a way to help. Volodymyr Zelensky's leadership inspired them. He did not hide. He stayed in Kyiv, walking through the streets, speaking to the people. His words gave them hope. "We are strong together," he said. And the people believed him. They believed in themselves. In small villages, farmers blocked roads with their tractors. They did not have weapons, but they had courage. They stood in front of tanks, refusing to move. Some carried the Ukrainian flag high, showing their pride. Teachers continued to teach, even in underground shelters. Schools were destroyed, but education did not stop. Children listened to lessons online, while explosions echoed outside. Parents whispered, "Keep learning no matter what." Students became volunteers. They helped deliver medicine and food. They carried supplies to soldiers on the front lines. Many young people joined the army, ready to defend their country. Their bravery surprised the world. Ukraine's fight was not just about land. It was about freedom. It was about the right to live without fear, the right to choose their own future. The world watched in awe. They saw ordinary people doing extraordinary things. Cities that were under attack did not break. People formed human chains to pass supplies. Neighbors helped each other. They shared food, water, and hope. Even in the darkest moments, kindness shone through. Some people left their homes and fled to safer places. But even from far away, they found ways to support their country. They donated money, sent messages of hope, and told the world about Ukraine's struggle. Volodymyr continued to speak to the world. He asked for support, for weapons, and for sanctions against Russia. He told leaders, "This is not just our war. It is a fight for freedom everywhere." His words touched hearts. Countries sent help, food, medical supplies, and military aid. The Ukrainian flag became a symbol of resistance. It flew over buildings in cities across the world. People from different countries marched in the streets, holding signs that said, "We stand with Ukraine." Despite the destruction, the spirit of the people remained unbroken. Volunteers risked their lives to help others. Doctors worked without rest, treating the injured. Grandmothers baked bread and gave it to soldiers with tears in their eyes. Every person played a part. A shopkeeper who gave free food, a driver who carried refugees to safety, a child who painted pictures of sunflowers, Ukraine's national symbol. There were moments of sadness. Families were separated. Homes were lost. But there were also moments of hope. People sang the national anthem in the streets. They helped each other, even when they had little to give. As the weeks passed, Ukraine's strength amazed the world. No one had expected them to resist for so long. But unity made them powerful. They were fighting not just for today, but for future generations. Volodymyr's message never changed. "We are one," he said. "We will fight together." His words echoed across the nation, bringing comfort and strength. In the end, Ukraine's greatest weapon was not just its army, but its people. Their unity was stronger than any tank, stronger than any bomb. They showed the world that true power comes from standing together. Chapter 11. A Symbol of Hope. As the war continued, the world watched Ukraine with admiration. People saw a country that refused to surrender. They saw a leader who would not back down. Volodymyr Zelensky had become more than a president. He had become a symbol of hope. At first, many people had doubted him. They thought he was just an entertainer. But now they saw something different. They saw his courage. They saw his strength. They saw his love for his country. Volodymyr's face appeared on television screens across the world. He spoke to millions. His words were powerful. He did not use complicated language. He spoke simply, from the heart. "This is not just about Ukraine," he said. "This is about freedom." Despite the danger, he stayed in Kiev. He walked through the streets, visited hospitals, and met with soldiers. His presence gave people strength. "We are here," he said again and again. Those words became a promise, a sign of resilience. World leaders listened. They invited him to speak at important meetings. He addressed the United Nations. He spoke to the European Parliament. He asked for help, not just for weapons, but for justice. "We must stand together against tyranny," he told them. Everywhere he spoke, people applauded. They admired his bravery. They called him a hero. But Volodymyr always shook his head. "This is not about me," he said. "It is about Ukraine." In different countries, people marched in support of Ukraine. They held blue and yellow flags. They sang Ukrainian songs. They sent food, money, and medicine. The world stood with Ukraine, inspired by its leader. Volodymyr met with presidents and prime ministers. He shook hands with leaders from Europe, the United States, and beyond. He thanked them for their support, but he always asked for more. "We need action, not just words," he said. His honesty impressed many. Despite the war, Volodymyr never lost hope. He believed in his people. He believed in their strength. He believed that Ukraine could win. "We are fighting for our future," he said, "and we will succeed." But leading in war was not easy. There were moments of sadness. Cities were destroyed. Families were separated. Every day there was new pain. Yet Volodymyr stood strong. He reminded his people that they were not alone. In one speech, he said, "We will rebuild every home. We will plant new trees. We will sing in the streets again." His words gave hope to those who had lost everything. Even in the darkest hours, he found moments to smile. He spoke to children hiding in shelters. He encouraged them to keep drawing pictures, to keep dreaming. "Your dreams matter," he told them. More countries joined Ukraine's cause. More people offered support. Volodymyr's leadership inspired them all. He showed that even in the face of danger, hope could survive. But the road ahead was long. The war was not over. The challenges were great. Still, Volodymyr kept going. "We will fight for as long as it takes," he said. His determination never wavered. Through it all, he remained humble. He did not see himself as a hero. He saw himself as a servant of the people. "I am just one man," he often said, "but together we are strong." His story reached every corner of the world. People admired his leadership. They admired Ukraine's spirit. They believed in their fight for freedom. Volodymyr Zelensky had become a global symbol, not just of Ukraine, but of resilience, unity, and hope. Chapter 12. A new chapter begins. The war is not over. The sounds of explosions still fill the air. Soldiers remain on the front lines. Families continue to seek shelter. Cities once full of life now stand in ruins. But through it all, Ukraine keeps fighting. The people do not give up. They hold on to hope. Volodymyr Zelensky stands with them. Every day, he works for his country. He speaks to world leaders. He visits soldiers. He comforts those who have lost their homes. His message never changes. Ukraine will not surrender. In Kiev, people continue their lives despite the danger. Shops reopen. Schools teach children in underground shelters. Farmers plant crops, even as war rages around them. The spirit of the nation remains unbroken. Volodymyr dreams of the day when peace will return. He talks about rebuilding. He sees a future where children can play safely in the streets. He imagines a time when families can return to their homes. "We will rebuild stronger than before," he says with confidence. The world watches and waits. Some believe Ukraine will win. Others fear the worst. But one thing is clear. Volodymyr and his people will not stop fighting for their freedom. Their courage has inspired millions. In speeches, Volodymyr reminds everyone of Ukraine's strength. "We have shown the world who we are," he says. "We are not afraid." His words encourage his people to keep moving forward. Rebuilding a nation will not be easy. The damage is great. Homes, schools, and hospitals have been destroyed, but Ukrainians are ready to work. Volunteers are already clearing debris. Engineers are making plans. Artists are painting murals of hope on broken walls. Despite the hardship, there are moments of joy. Soldiers receive letters from children filled with colorful drawings and kind words. Families separated by war find ways to stay connected. People sing the national anthem in the streets, holding each other tightly. Volodymyr knows there is still a long way to go. He is tired, but he will not rest. "Every day brings us closer to victory," he tells his team. His determination gives them strength. Many call him a hero, but Volodymyr shakes his head. "The true heroes are the people of Ukraine," he says. He believes in their power, in their unity. he knows they will build a better future together. His journey from comedian to president has been extraordinary. Once, he made people laugh. Now, he makes them believe. His story is proof that courage and unity can change the world. Around the globe, people continue to support Ukraine. They donate money. They send supplies. They light candles in their windows to show solidarity. Ukraine's fight has become a fight for freedom everywhere. Volodymyr stands at the center of it all. His leadership, his hope, and his love for his country inspire millions. We will write a new chapter, he says, a chapter of peace, of strength, of victory. And so, the story continues. The battle is not over, but neither is the dream. Ukraine fights on. For today, for tomorrow, and for generations.